Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Inherited podcast, where we explore beliefs, behaviors, trauma, resilience, and healing that are passed on from generation to generation and on to the next. I am your host, Jessica Sanchez, founder and CEO of Daughters of Both Sons. And on today's episode, one of the most common questions people ask themselves after experiencing trauma is what's wrong with me? But what if that's the wrong question? What if our anxiety, perfectionism, people pleasing, and emotional numbness, or even hyper independence or difficulty in trusting others aren't signs that we're broken, but evidence that we learn how to survive? Today's guest has dedicated her work to helping people understand childhood trauma through a different lens, one rooted in compassion, neuroscience, education, and hope. And she is the founder of Your Steps Counselling and the creator of the Ascendance Method, an approach that helps people understand how survival, adaptations shape mental health, relationships, parenting, and lifelong wellness. So please join me in welcoming Barb Smith. And Barb, welcome to the Inherited podcast. Before we dive into your work, if someone asked you to describe your mission in one sentence, what would it be?
The break the cycle, change the world. That would be my motto. That's my motto. Because if we break the cycle of generations trauma, we can literally change the world.
I 100% agree with you. And I wanted to touch on when you stated, what if nothing is wrong with us, right? A question that I don't think most of us even ask ourselves. We always tend to jump to what is wrong with us, but never if maybe there's nothing wrong with me at all, right? And one of the things that I love about your work when I was researching the work that you do is that you challenge the question. Instead of asking what's wrong with me, you ask how did I adapt to survive? And that's a profound shift. So can you explain why that question changes everything?
Well, it's changing everything because it's changing the agency. It's changing how we actually really looking on how trauma shaped our lives, but also giving us the way out of it. And that was my goal, to find the way out, because I suffered myself the childhood trauma, and it's affected my mental health, but also my physical health. And I find a way out of it, and I start seeing the same patterns in other people, but we all choosing different way of how we coping with what happened to us. So when we actually realize that we adapted to survive, that actually mean that we are amazing. It's mean that we have amazing capacity to adapt. And if we created one pattern and behavior and reactions based on what happened to us, we can change that. We can undo that pattern. We can release that emotion we stored, and we can start life in different way.
I 100% agree with you, and it's all about perspective, right? And why do you think that so many people grow up believing that they're somehow broken?
Now, I spoken about the concept which I named the 5 pillars of self. We are all born with the innate functions as the humans, and there are 5 of them, which the key one, it's inner strength, but we have also self-love, wisdom, intuition, and purpose. But in the childhood, if our needs are not fulfilled, our inner strengths, which is supposed to be that feeling of safety, feeling of we know where our boundaries are, we expressing ourselves, we acting upon our desires and upon our purpose, shrinking if our needs are not fulfilled. And what's happening that we literally shrinking that energy which is inside of us but also around us, and we putting it in and make it smaller. We kind of start hiding. And what that mean is that first of all, we're using a lot of energy to do that, and secondly, it mean that we get to that we kind of switch on the survival mode. And in survival mode, we are not choosing what we want in life. We are not choosing who we want to be, partners, jobs. We just, I would say, grabbing. We just selecting what is available nearest because we have this inside desperate need of survive. And we're not realizing that everything which happening to the little children, which their needs are not fulfilled, for child mind is the death threat. The child is very aware that it's dependent on their parents to get the food, to get the shelter, be safe, And when their needs for emotional safety, for hunger, for sleep, for temperature, for food are not fulfilled, they just very afraid. They just living actually in the fear of dying, and from that they really embody that fear, and then they're not developing who they really are. They're just trying to survive on any cost. So it's very common if I will ask people who are traumatized, and you will probably also from work you doing, is that when you ask people who are traumatized, who are you? What do you like about yourself? Very often when we ask people, what do you like about yourself? They would say, I don't know, or nothing. And the reason is because they actually really don't know who they really are, because they just trying to survive. And the trauma response is almost creating their identity, but they are not their identity. They are just how they surviving.
That we do here at Daughters of Both Sides. And, I started the nonprofit due to lived experience and especially dealing with trauma informed care. And one thing that I've learned is that the blueprint of your childhood goes into what you become in your adulthood. You're conditioned to believe that this is the normal, quote unquote. And I think we have to start as we keep doing this advocacy work and learning and educating ourselves, deconstructing ourselves as well, because we have been conditioned from a young age to have certain belief systems. Even when we look at the two parent household, right, of what a mother and a father should be. And yet, when we look at the hierarchy and that tree, based on the patterns that they have taught us and their behaviors, we tend to believe, well, this is normal. This is what I think a father should be. This is what I think a mother should be. Or this is how I think a perceived relationship should be. So, that has, when we look at it in those lenses, it does change even the way we start to think about ourselves, even for those that are doing the inner work and working on childhood trauma, right? And I've been doing so much work for years myself, and I don't accept myself from this work as well, because I always like to say healing is non-linear. We continue to learn things about ourselves, we continue to evolve, and we continue to grow. And as we do so, there's things that we're going to learn about ourselves that we are not going to be so pretty, and things that are going to be, eye openers for us to start to look at the way that we present certain behaviors or the way that we react as well to certain circumstances. So
Yeah.
I 100% agree with that as
Oh,
well.
I
Hmm.
have slightly different point on it, is that
Hmm.
it is not linear, but it can end. And it's about that we actually should try to really work towards recovery. And recovery means that same as when we break our leg, we put the cast on and we have 8 weeks to cast, and then we take it off and we walking again as normal. And maybe slightly slower, but we speeding up, and we can be fully functional. So I believe that is one of the kind of myth of the trauma, that it has to be almost forever, that the rest of our lives we need to working on recovery. What I find out when kind of reverse engineer what is actually happening during our childhood with our mindset, that we can reverse it in the way that we can achieve that state that we are not more affected by the past. I call it the steps of ascendance. It's a 4 phases which we need to go through to actually get to the point that we are now and here. We know who we are, and the past happened, but doesn't influence us anymore. And I think that is a very important shift in narrative around the trauma. That doesn't mean that we need to live in it forever. And it's also mean that when we become, as parents or grandparents, become in that state of presence, we can prevent to pass that on the next generation, because our behavior will change, and we can treat children in different way, and teach them different way about managing emotions, and help them process what's happening to them, so they can actually grow up to the adults which doesn't need to recovering from the childhood trauma because they already processed them. Yeah.
And I think that's extremely important. For example, my 12-year-old, I'm big on therapy, very big on therapy and being able to start, even at a young age, calling out certain behaviors and why certain behaviors are done, but also the way that we decide to raise our children and the way that we decide to speak to them, and just be very honest, because it takes a lot of conversation as well. And like I said, deconstructing, and that helps break generational patterns as well. Because when we're taking the time to do the opposite of what our brains have been, because it's trained, right? We're trained subconsciously without realizing to be or think these certain patterns, right? Without realizing them. So when what I do with my child is that I take the time to not only speak to her but explain to her why even certain behaviors that she does, right? Why it can have effects in her life later on. And I like to correlate that with even experiences that I've been through, obviously age appropriate, right? But to explain why I'm taking that corrective action as well, but also having an environment where there's room, almost like an open door policy, where your child can feel comfortable coming to you and talking about these things. Because as well, many of us grew up with a fear and reverence to our parents, where we decided to boggle things up out of, there's that respect factor, and you feel like you can't have that emotional connection with the parent because of the figure of how they're presenting it, almost if the parent is higher than, right, the child, instead of us looking at the child and the parent like we're just both human beings experiencing at different stages this thing that we call life, and trying to deal. We hold parents to a specific standard, but that doesn't make them immortal, or it doesn't make them unhuman, because we have to humanize the parents as well.
No, I absolutely agree with that. I always say that it starts with the dummy, because actually when the parents give the dummy, which real name it's pacifier, it's to the children. It's the first moment when we start telling the children that what they feel, their emotions, their needs are not important. We're just telling them kind of shut up. We're just telling them like, I don't care that you are hungry. I don't care that you are afraid. I don't care that you are tired, or whatever reason they're crying. They're crying because they're trying to tell us something, and we're just refusing to listen. I raised my son without dummy. It's possible. There is quite a movement in the US also about moms without dummies. And when you do that, you realize that they don't cry the same way. Each cry have different, and you start tuning to them, and you realize what they actually really need. And the cry will stop when you fulfill the need. So it's not that they would cry somewhat extremely. But when we do that, they really start suppressing that inner strength, and they start living in that fear to express themselves, and actually start believe that they have no right to be themselves. So one of my frameworks, which I'm teaching the parents, also for adults, is I call it LOVA, LOVA. easy to remember. Love your children. And it's a listen, but listen really and be present. Don't run in your mind already what you will answer, inner critique, or like, oh, your life is easy, mine was hard, and all these things. And then observe, really watch the children, because even if they will not say it, they will show it in their behavior, in their emotions, what they actually feel. And then validate what they're feeling and tell them, I see that you are angry, why you are angry. I see that you are sad, why you are sad. I see that you are happy, what are you happy about? In all ways, because all emotions are important. And then express, but express not just how we're reacting to what they do, but our real emotions we have. And we are also sometimes afraid, or we are angry in the right way, we something stepping over our boundaries. But that's one of these typical things which parents often not do, not expressing how they actually feel, because they still living in their own trauma responses and in numbing moments. And we can see it, like a lot of parents would have this experience that, you kind of lost a child in the mall or parking lot or supermarket. Child just walking around, just because they are curious, which is what the children should be. And we are actually afraid. But when we are afraid, will naturally come anger, because anger is protective emotion. It's not actually negative emotion. And often when we find a child, instead of telling them, oh, I was so afraid that something happened to you, I'm so glad that I found you, we projecting that anger on them, like, how dare you walk away and not do it again. And the child is actually confused and don't understand what we're doing, because if we express that fear, they do understand that. They that's aligning with us. They know, okay, I'm not supposed to do that because something would happen to me. They're afraid. They want to protect me. But if we projected anger on them, then are confused, because for them it's mean like, why I'm punished for being curious? Like, what's wrong with being curious? So it's like, I'm not allowed to be curious. So it's very important for parents to get to that point and really start working on themselves, to stop reacting from their subconscious, the reactions they build up through their childhood. And very important is that there is no blame game, because my parents were loving. My parents tried their best. But the situation I grew up in, what happened, my mom had accident and poverty and all that, I developed the trauma. But it's not necessarily has to be that parents are not loving. They also do their best. And when we speak about generational trauma, we have everywhere in the world, we have passing on an ancestral trauma, because we have these big events in the nations. Like, I am from the Central Europe, so it was the First World War, Second World War. And those who survive it, their parenting will change naturally. And quite a lot of people acting from their own trauma from war would be controlling, harsh, numb, cold to their children. And, be happy that you have something on the food because we were hungry. Be happy that you are not slave. Be happy that you are not in camp. And diminish the needs of the next generation. And every nation, every corner of the world has something which happened there. Is it like we don't have, any place in the world when there wasn't some these big events or going. But that is very important to stopping this pattern of passing on the generational trauma. Every generation have the right, their needs to be fulfilled. And yes, it's very unfair and sorry that their needs wasn't fulfilled, but it doesn't mean that we can use it as excuse. That's why I always saying that trauma is explanation, trauma is not excuse. So we can start realizing why we acting like that, what happened to us, and realize that the next generation have the right to be themselves, to choose, to have their needs fulfilled, even if R wasn't. So that's a very important shift for people to understand that they can change, and they should have that responsibility to stop passing it on their children.
Can you give examples of adaptations people often mistake for personality traits? So, for example, this is ones that I hear a lot: people pleasing, perfectionism, emotional shutdown, being hyper vigilant, overachieving, difficulty in trusting others, and hyper independence. How do these behaviors actually develop?
So we have the 4 trauma responses, and everybody know fight, flight, freeze. But we have also fawn, which is the people pleasing. And the fight and flight responses are about remove from the situation we are in. We fight it out or we run away. And in the adulthood, we can see it as, for example, fight is very often about workaholism, about like you need to do it your best. You will go over others just to be the best, just, fighting. But it's also can show up as controlling, like because it's about that, like I need to have it control over that because otherwise I feel very insecure. Then we have this freeze and fawn, and they are about to staying in situation, and freeze is about not doing anything, which will show as depression, which will show as sometimes people describe it laziness, but it's not. A lot of people are not lazy, they just froze in the moment. They rather not decide to do anything because they just afraid of their actions. But and fawn, which is people pleasing, it's like if you have the pet rabbit trying to just survive. Actually, it's not your friend. He's just like will adapt to what expecting is. So children actually much more operate in this freeze and fawn thing because they cannot leave the situation. They need to stay there. They need to survive. So they will perfectionism about it's variety actually of the people pleasing. Perfectionism is about like if I will be perfect, I will be accepted, I will be safe, I will be loved, I will be appreciated, I will be safe. Same hypervigilance is about that I need to be on lookout. I cannot, and it's about that suppressed inner strengths. We don't know where our boundaries are, so we are so on permanently scanning like marine seal to like what's happening, which is leading to overload our sensor system, struggle to focus, and not trusting yourself, because in hypervigilance actually mean that we not trusting our intuition, we don't trusting our reactions. And this is a 5th one, which I call fake resilience, and is that one that hyper independence, or that feeling like I am strong, I will achieve it, and society supporting it. In the school is telling children you need to have the best grades, you need to be best in sports and best in science and get to the best school. Or people from poverty levels, like I will get out of here, I will just get it, I will get out of here. But it's the price for it is the emotions. It's meaning numbing all these emotions, numbing that anger, numbing that fear, numbing that sadness, but it's also mean numbing the joy, numbing the excitement and motivation. And it's not sustainable because as we keep doing it, it will start popping out. So that could be outburst of anger. It could be, or slipping to depression. People could become bipolar. People can start developing pain, or they will end up in total burnout, or they will end up in the feeling of panic attack and feeling they have a heart attack. But women will quite often develop some autoimmune disorder from that, like fibromyalgia or MS, and or chronic fatigue syndrome. They would have unexpected pain, arthritis, and all these things. Or they will go to the unhealthy coping mechanisms, as using the drugs or food, too much or too little. It doesn't matter. It's about a desperate desire to control my environment so I feel safe. But we can restore it if we actually let this emotion from the past let go, which we can do with many techniques. If it's the breathwork, somatic, or what I'm doing, it's somatic hypnotherapy, which is techniques that should combine this and make it very effective. we can let it go out, and then we can restore that feeling of safety. We can switch off completely that survival mode and start realizing that life is about something different than just trying to, in every moment of the day, to hold it all together.
Because of trauma and past experiences, there's a control factor because you have fear of losing control because you didn't have control in those situations. And that does impact future relationships as well. Because in reality, realistically, we are not in control of anything, everything, right? We could control our actions and how we choose to react for the most part, but we can control other people, our environment. There's so many things that are in limitation to what we can do. For example, our podcast is called Inherited because so much of what we carry wasn't chosen for us. What patterns do you most commonly see passed from one generation to the next?
I think that we a lot of see these two polarities of those who trying to desperately not be as their parents, and those who just naturally follow these roles because they don't know anything else. And I think that the issue is that if the parents kind of keep living in victim mode, in that way of blaming that it's not their fault that it's happened to them, they quite passing it on their children, and a lot of their children will choose the same pattern of like, I cannot do anything with that, it's how it is. It will normalize it, that that's a reality, they have to live with that. Or they will go to that fight mode and they will become, I need to be strong, but they can go to aggression, they can go to like being bitchy, I would say, and like be in the way like, oh, I need to prove that I'm strong, I need to prove that I'm different. Yeah. And that's just switching between different trauma responses. Because when we get to that real resilience, when we stop pretending to be somebody who we really are not, that reality is very calm and steady and grounded, and we can stop distractions. We have many people say like, my mom had the headache, so I have the headaches. No, you don't. You don't have hereditary headaches. You just learn that headache, it's a great escape from what needs to be done. Same as, I don't know, gallbladder issues, like, which are about swallowing the anger. Like, yeah, mom swallow the anger or play the card of the victim. I have the pain, so I need to be pitied. And they will start following the same model because it's a model they will teach as the children to do. They may be similar, some same thing or different type of pain, and using it as the pity card. So it's different in each family, but very important is that we can change that. And I will be publishing the book, which is called Purposeful Parenting, How to Raise the Healthy Mind. And it's about application Ascendance Method to the family life. And I wrote it because the people who went through recovery with me and with parents, they keep asking me, okay, so what is that healthy way of parenting? I don't know. And we don't know that if we just going from that old patterns, or we trying something else, but we are not really sure why we're doing a different way or what the results we expecting. And the first question I ask in that book is, why you are parent? What does actually mean for you to be parent? And it's about that we not asking ourselves the questions which we need to ask ourselves. And as we started today with that question, so what if nothing wrong with you? What if you actually adapted to survive? What is change for you in that way? That's mean that you can change, that you can have that agency. The same way when we parenting, we can actually start realizing it doesn't matter how did you get to that point that you are parent, but you need to really acknowledge why you are parent. because your choices lead to that moment. If it was accident after disco, yes, it's still your responsibility. Why did you actually end up in that? And unwinding these subconscious decisions we have, like, I want to feel loved. I want to feel that somebody touching me. I wanted to feel wanted, because as the child I didn't have that, for example, very common with the woman, or it was expected by the family. I'm woman, I have to have children. Um, it's a many different reasons, thousands of them, but we need to start asking ourselves different questions than what is normal, like this is how it's supposed to be. No, your life is your life. You need to decide for yourself about every single thing, and in going to how you feel about everything, and going rebuilding the belief in your intuition, in your self-love, which will tell you what is good for you or not, but which is not developing in childhood trauma. Because if we suppressing children, as you beautifully said, like, if children feeling that they don't have the right to choose, they have to respect, they have to obey, they're not actually building their self-love, because they are not giving the choice. But without that, we not doing the good choices for ourselves, and then we regret that. But that's also part of the process. We need to regret and realize, okay, that's a past, process that, and get to that moment when we can actually be now and present, and go to that last step, which is finding who you really are without trauma.
Your work that stands out to me also is that healing isn't psychological. You talk about restoring the balance between the mind, body, and spirit. Could you explain why that connection is so important and how trauma actually does affect the body?
So, mind directing the body, because the brain telling the body what to do. We can see it on all illnesses which are about disconnection between body, like multiple sclerosis or Parkinson and stuff like that. So when we suppress their emotions, they first end up in the head, and we all know that you will have the long day, you working, you do a lot of mental work, for example, you teaching or you learning, and you would end up that you have the headache. You will have that feeling that you have the pressure in your head, and you get the headache. And it's because you holding this in. If you will go and you go for a walk and you breathe and you will allow yourself get that emotions out, it will all stop. But if you holding it in, you overwhelming it, and the body will start storing it, and it will go lower and lower. And it's why we can see it very significantly in our children. They would be often ill, often will have running nose, or fever, because those are symptoms of uncried tears or suppressed anger. But we putting it in more inside, and it starts spreading through our bodies, through the soft tissues, through the nervous system. So first things we have, like typical anxiety, is that you are nauseous, is it? It's that emotions of the fear are stored there, or that feeling that you cannot take your breath, that you feel like something lying on you when you have the panic attack. This emotion of the anger, which are just lying here like big stone on your chest. So body is storing it in different ways, and it's mean that we getting not feel good and developing different way of illnesses, which we can release it from the body. And it's about that body is the vessel which we need for living, but mind is that one who directing. But on the other side, the body helping us, because we can ask body what's wrong with, and often we can see it in the how we speaking, like, I cannot swallow it anymore. If you are taking in anger and you literally swallowing, and typical example is that you will have the issue with the gallbladder, you just swallowing that bitterness and that anger. So we need to restore our mind to be able to restore our body and our spirit, because we are all have purpose. We are not just, we are humans. We have soul. We need to actually live our purpose and be aware of what it is. how we fit into community, how we fit into our families. And until we living in survival mode, we are unable to do that. We can know what it is and not act upon it, or we don't even know what it is, and then we feel depressed, we feel, like numb, we feel like life is not worth living. Why I'm actually even trying? So we need to work on all three levels, because otherwise we can start in different points, so people can choose. Somebody starts through exercising or yoga, and they will start moving and they will get to that mind level, or you can start from the mind level and then you will get on the body level, or you can start through working on your spiritual life. It's all fine, but you need to balance all three in that 4 steps, which is recognizing, release, regret, and rediscovery. And doesn't matter which tools or like how you will do it, but you need to achieve these 4 steps to actually get to that present moment.
No, speaking about the role of faith, meaning, and purpose and spirituality, it plays a big role within your healing process, right? Because these are fragments or parts of our lives that we have considered. Everybody has a different type of spiritual life, right? Depending on your faith, beyond the values you hold, but depending on what you actually believe in. And that's also a way, right, of conditioning in the mind. But that also, even through prayer, for most people, when they pray, all like the neurons that activate in your brain and the positive stimuli. So, and for other people, that's like if they do yoga, meditation, or other things, it is reproducing that positive stimuli in the person. So, and it helps with your healing process because everything is, as you said, interconnected at the end of the day. But it doesn't matter, as you were saying, whether you decide to start with the mind, body, and spirit. Start, I'm like, start somewhere, right? Because in this work, I tell people tend to tell me they feel hopeless, right? Or if they're going through severe depression and there's an escalation. But I tell them, look, there's still a part of you that still has hope, because the fact that you're reaching out for help is that's a meaningful segment to me that you have not given up on yourself yet.
Mm.
Like, anyone that has given up on themselves are not in to talk through it. You know, folks, and you can have all of these emotions and seek the help that you need. But like I tell people, know that you're stronger than even you make yourself believe. Because the fact that you're reaching out for assistance, that's your fight or flight kicking in, saying, I need a help. I need to raise up. I can't continue like this anymore. I need to survive this, right?
Mm.
I think they don't give themselves enough credit as well while they go through these things. I know you were talking about your book and then parenting through healing. Many of our listeners are parents. Some are raising children while trying to heal themselves. So, what advice will you give parents who worry that they'll unintentionally pass their trauma to their children?
No, I'll say like start really pay attention to how you really feel, and start apply the brutal honesty to yourself, because we lying ourselves so much through the childhood trauma. We telling ourselves that we are not good enough, which is not true. We telling ourselves that we are not worthy, which is not true. We are telling ourselves we don't deserve to be loved. That's not true. We, we are telling ourselves that we are failing. That's not absolutely not true, because our mind always doing your best. The results, it's maybe not what you wanted, but your mind always doing your best. So if the result is not what you want, you need to change your actions. So I always recommend the parents start really working on your emotions. And it can sound paradox, but allow yourself to be angry. Because truth be told that most of childhood trauma, it's actually based on suppressed anger because we suppress that inner strength, and inner strength working with our anger. So find a safe way, not on your children, not on your partner, safe way how to express your anger. But actually it's a great partners exercise, even like hold to each other the pillow from the sofa and punch that pillow. Do it intentionally. Go to the wrecking room, rage rooms. They are available now quite widely. Take the baseball bat and smash the old TV. Do something where you can actually release that emotions, which from the past. Allow yourself to admit that your childhood wasn't what you wanted, that your childhood didn't fulfill your needs. And it's not anybody else's fault. It could be. And it's not about forgiveness. It's just about get that emotions out, because then you are more present. Then you can be actually present for your children. You will stop terrifying them with your outbursts of anger or your indifference and not knowing what you really feel, because the children actually tuning to us. They do what they see. They know how we feel. We can telling them whatever we want to tell them. They anyway know how we feel. So be honest with yourself, and then start be honest with the others. So have honest and open conversations about basics. And we, again, as we spoke about what is normal, we expecting that other people do it the same way things. We don't. If the parents came together, they are from two different families. They each doing things different way. They're expecting to do things different way. So start with that you will have the honest conversation with your partner, how you wash the dishes, how you fold the clothes, how you sweep the floor, what it's mean clean the room, what it's mean to have the rest time. Because we almost like thinking that we are all telepaths and be able to read others' mind, or we expecting that other person do it the same as we, and we expecting that they will magically fulfill our needs, even we actually don't know what our needs are. So first we need to be honest with ourselves. So be honest with yourself. Find what your needs are. And then it's your responsibility to fulfill your needs, not your partner, not your children. The partner can play a role in it if they are willing to fulfill some of your needs. But expectation that one person will fulfill all your needs is very unfair demand, which we still quite applying. And also children are not here to fulfill your needs. Children are here to be in your care. So it's completely opposite. They would complete some need. They would be happily helping. They would be cooperating because they will want to if you actually honest about your feelings and your needs. Because you will also take care about them. So they will just ask as a human. And children are not second level class citizens. They are just human in the small form. So first start respect yourself and respect your children, because mutual respect is actually leading to the healing and not passing it on.
I love this too. Your work involves supporting neurodiverse individuals and families. And as I have a child that has autism, and I think this support is much needed as well, because sometimes trauma and neurodiversity can overlap or be misunderstood. I mean, how can caregivers better understand the difference, and how can we create environments where neurodivergent children and adults feel understood rather than judged?
No, I think that is actually coming from that when we realize and we stop differentiate between who is neurodiverse and who is not, we will just realize that we are all unique and we all have different needs, and start looking on needs they have, then we can accommodate them, both as neurodiverse parents or neurodiverse children. And so actually neurodiverse children teaching us amazing things. They teaching us that they will not store their emotions. to prevent develop the trauma. They would have meltdowns, they would show the emotions avoid. That's not actually unhealthy. That's actually very healthy. We're just trying to fit them to that social norms about sit quietly, don't express your emotions. Secondly, they would talk. If they talk, they would say about what they are interested in. That's actually also very healthy. We should be interested in what our children like, and they would be same way in to some level interested in what we are if we putting it in the engaging form. And everything is about the needs around them. So yeah, they could have sensory overload. They could have need for different food or different clothes or different colors or different way of organizing. But when we actually simplify it to that, then we just need to listen and realize and testing with them what their needs are. They start function, because with neurodiverse it's all about strategies, and it's not what one fits all. It's 1,000 of strategies, and everybody have the different one. But if we apply this rule with every single child, not just those who are neurodiverse, we will realize that all children thrive, those which are neurodiverse and those which are not, because they actually don't have they have different needs in some way. Children which are not neurodiverse maybe have more emotional needs, or would have desire to learn in some areas, or participate in something. Children which are neurodiverse would be more clear about what their interests are, and quite often you cannot force them to what they are not interested. Again, that's not wrong. People should do what they are interested in. That if we society work like that, we will be better society. So in the same way, when we apply it to children which are not neurodiverse and focus on what their interests are and allow them to be themselves, we can learn from it. And I think that the one thing which neurodiverse children most challenge the parents is exact that expectation of normality, expectation that they will be as I am. They are not as I am. They are not as you are. They are them. And they are able to, they shouldn't be, and they kind of unable to be forced not to be themselves. They would have meltdowns. They would not cope. They would, so they are actually almost example of how we're not supposed to force children not to be themselves, how we're not supposed to force children to suppress their emotions, how we're not supposed to force children to activities they don't want to do. We're not supposed to force them to do food they body rejecting, because even not neurodivergent children would have the food which is texture wise not fit to them, digestive wise. And that freedom and the needs actually really starting from these basics. Are we forcing children to eat what is on the plate, even them adamantly saying that they don't want it? Like, I can example of myself for that. I cannot eat the Brussels sprouts. Since I was little, I cannot eat the Brussels sprouts. I just cannot stand it. My mom accepted that and don't make it eat me. In school, they would force me to eat it. Like, it is part of the food, you have to eat it. I would eat it and then I will throw it away. I will vomit. I cannot stand it. And they didn't believe me, and they keep doing it. They say, like, no, you have to do that. When I was adult, I actually find out that my body doesn't digest sulfur, and it's in that type of vegetables, so that I literally cannot eat these vegetables. So children know their bodies. Children know how they feel after different foods. We are not all same. Some are more meat oriented, some are more grain oriented. We have different sleeping patterns. You can have the night owl and early bird. We have different affinity to the colors, which have different frequencies. So it's really about to start looking what the strategies are with the child. So I have neurodiverse child, and it was that learning curve. But every time when I work with some other young adults or their parents, it's really about that, like, actually allow them to say what it is, what they need, and listen to them, and not telling them they shouldn't, they should adapt or they should take it in. It's just not possible for them.
hard, but we have to look at it in a lens of how they're perceiving and thinking, because their mind frames and the way they think, they're either black or they're black and white. They don't have the same emotional component to what we put to things. So when they mean something, they're very literal about what they're saying, what they mean, and how they feel. Even at the moment, I try to put myself as much as I possibly can in his shoes on how he's perceiving the situation at the time, right? And that helps me have patience with him. I think, in my opinion, more compassion, learn patience, be able to step away from ourselves and put ourselves in a different perspective of, how is this child perceiving and thinking of this? And that's how we can choose how to react, right? In terms of being able to help navigate those challenges with our children when it comes to food. Like you said, sensory needs. Maybe they don't want to wear certain things because they know how their body feels. And it's
Mm,
like if something was itching you. When you wear something, you had the option to continue to scratch yourself all day. So for them, because it's a sensory need, we're thinking it's, oh my God, it's just a shirt. Just wear the shirt. To them, they're like, no, this is bothering me. Like, but we have to start thinking ahead, right? And ahead, I mean, like, we need to start being more mindful of
mm.
where they could be perceiving those things as well. So my last thing I wanted to ask was about the Ascendance Method. How is it developed and how is it different from traditional approaches to trauma recovery?
So, I created Ascendance Method as the result of my trainings and practicing, and it's different in that way that we really focusing on these things of the restoring the pillars of self, actually getting back to how we're supposed to function, going through that 4 steps: awareness, absolution, acceptance, and ascendance. And it's different from that way, that is really not looking on what is wrong with you, but okay, how, why are you using this behavior, why are you using this pattern, and start really looking and very quickly releasing these patterns and these emotions, and going through very important part, which is regret and grieving. And that's very underestimated in the trauma, that when we get through that recognizing and release, and we get to that what I call absolution, which is from Latin absolutus, set free, we are not anymore affected by that past. We start looking back on the life and realize, wow, how much the trauma actually took from me, which opportunities I didn't took, which relationship I end up in, and all that. And actually need to also come through that phase of actually grieving our life and grieving the childhood, and getting to that acceptance that, okay, it did happen, but now I am here and now. And that last phase is that rediscovery. So I'm walking people through this path, and what people find is that actually it's very quick. You can actually get to that point of being fully present in 3 months, because if we actually know what needs to happen, we going dive in really to your subconscious mind, and you find for yourself, you release it from your body, you get that tools. And it's about that. I saying sometimes that trauma is the lack of education, but in the principle that the mind just keep repeating what learned as the in the childhood. If we give the mind the different way how to cope it, if we teach the mind you can do something else instead of these trauma responses, mine is like, yup, hooray, I will do it. Because it's just so then it's going very quickly. When we almost, like I would say, like open the doors of flood, it will just flooding out. If we give the mind the way how to get it out, the mind wants to get it out. It's actually, mind always wants us to get to the better place. And we restore working with intuition and realizing that we can be wise and finding the purpose, and really restored balance, mental, bodily, and physical and energetical, to get to that point where I call ascendance, that point when we are free to be ourselves, free to express our emotions, free to speak up, free to have opinion, free to choose, and actually start living life in different way. And I like to use the description of one of my client who describe it as that it's not different chapter in the life, it's a sequel.
Agree. And one thing that I tell people is we need to give our time to grieve relationships because it's a loss. It's almost like
Yeah.
a death. It's a death of what was. And I don't think we see relationships in that way. And that's probably why we jump from one thing to another because we haven't also given ourselves the time to grieve and we continue to bring over those patterns that we had in the previous relationship to the new one because it is a grieving process. And another thing that I think I wanted to highlight that's important is we need to stop as well telling people to, you have to let it go, right? Telling
Yeah.
people just let it go. That irks me. Don't tell, like, part of healing and processing is talking through, and that's where the suppression goes because you can't tell people that they need to let something go. If there's something bothering you, you need to let that out until you feel like it's let out and process it in a healthy manner. But we can't just put things under or push them under the rug and think that, hey, it's
Mhm.
okay and to move on. We need to do better as a society with that for sure. But I'm gonna play, this is a quick game that we play here and you basically complete the sentence. So I will say the first part and you'll complete it. It's called rapid
Okay.
fire. So let me start with the first sentence. Healing begins with
Recognition.
one belief you'd like everyone to let go of.
That trauma is forever.
Resilience means
To be present, grounded, and safe.
the most misunderstood part of trauma is
That it's a what happened to us, but trauma is how we react to what happened to us.
a daily practice that supports emotional wellness.
Self-reflection, to look back on how I felt uh, in the situations, to be able to realize what really happened inside of me.
And then the last one word that describes hope.
Ascendance.
I would agree. And, as we finish up, I want the audience to just think and self reflect on how childhood trauma can affect your physical health, even for decades to come. Why do some people remember childhood clearly while others don't? Because that's something that is prevalent and does happen. How do survival adaptations affect romantic relationships? Also, can someone heal even if the people who hurt them never apologize? And how we can begin in rebuilding trust within ourselves as well. What I wanted to ask you is what unhealthy beliefs do families unknowingly pass from generation to generation?
Um, I think that the basic one is really you are not enough, and or you cannot be yourself, because a lot of parents living with that, they not themselves, they still living in survival mode. They actually unknowingly creating the same belief in their children that you cannot be yourself. You have to um play the role, you have to play somebody's expectations, what it's mean to be man, what it's mean to be woman, what relationship you're supposed to have, and what career you're supposed to do, and not really supporting be yourself. And when we change that, when we start supporting our children, just be yourself, then it will all stop.
And this is a closing reflection, Barb, for someone listening today who has felt years feeling ashamed on how they cope. what would you want them to hear before we end today's conversation?
I would again just reiterate that you are not broken. You just adapted to survive. So you can change all that. You can, I'm not saying let go of past, you can process the past to that way that decision about future is in your hands.
100% agree. So, Barb, thank you for helping us reframe trauma through the lens of understanding instead of judgment. Your message reminds us that many of the behaviors that we tend to criticize in ourselves began as brilliant strategies to survive difficult circumstances. And to everyone listening, remember this: your survival adaptations tell a story. They are not your identity. Healing doesn't begin by asking what's wrong with me. It begins by asking what happened to me, how did I learn to survive. That shift opens the door to compassion, growth, and lasting change. And today's episode resonated with you, please subscribe to the Inherited Podcast, leave a review, and share this conversation with someone who may need it. We'll also include Barb's link for her Your Steps Counselling in the Ascendance Method in the episode description so you can continue to learn her work. Until next time, remember, while we inherit survival patterns, we also have the pattern to create a new legacy, one rooted in understanding, healing, and hope.